everybody has a good spot for 3 tracks and stools over here, and I'll give the floor up to Jerry. And thanks again, guys. Put your hands together for Jerry from DSI.
I figured because I play that big red meat feedback thing first, you know, I try some other opposite sound, because the spectrum of what's possible in the Prophet X is enormous, and so tender and really subtle, and it can be really in your face at the same time, and there's all this stuff in between. So I'm going to try to play as many sounds as possible, and also just explain what it is. Dave told us about a year ago, this was the project, to do an analog synthesizer with samples on the board. And have those samples be able to pass through the analog circuitry, the filter especially. And you know, it was just such an odd direction, just such a new, fresh, for someone to say that, was just kind of perplexing and amazing, you know, because everyone was pretty much making amazing modular gear, and going in all kinds of directions. But Dave really is not a market research guy. He just does the thing he feels he wants to do. And we're partnering big time with another company to do this piece. And that company is called 8DO, number 8DIO. I'm not sure what it stands for, but I had never heard of them myself, and I thought I knew everybody. But they're pretty much film composer, sound content providers, so that they're into sampling deeply every instrument possible and getting all the idioms and all the mic positions, and they call it deep sampling. But they sell to the film composer community, and maybe that's the reason I never heard of them, because first of all, their content bundles are super expensive, because they have this kind of depth of what they do, and it's super high quality. So in a way, for Dave to be convinced that it was a good idea to partner with 8DO, the only reason he met Trolls, one of the principals, was that they lived nearby in Napa, close by. They did a great grocery store kind of romance for some years, and all of a sudden, let's do something, you know, and it's like, why would you put film sound in a key? Sort of like that. But that's what happened. Trolls convinced Dave that it was a really good idea, and what we're left with is a really, probably the best sounding Prophet synth. If you just ignored the samples and you say, well, what can we do with these 2 oscillators? They're from the Prophet 12. They're evolved. I learned this from Carson the other day. It's like, don't say they're the Prophet 12 oscillators. They kind of are, but they're just like dialed up to be better now, and those were dialed up to be better than ones before them. So yes, kind of the same. They're digital oscillators. They're 10 octave. They're multi-wave, but they're new versions that sound better. So I realized at that point that, yeah, really, in the end, the development never stops. There's a new part that's better. There's a new algorithm. There's a new formula to solve some problem that's better. So, but basically, you have 2 of those oscillators and 2 of these samples. That makes up 1 voice. I'm touching the mixer part. You can actually see me do that. Yeah. So that's the mixer right there. You see it. Oscillator. Now that makes, right out of the box, 8 voices. This is a stereo instrument. So it starts out in stereo. Everything they've recorded is in stereo. And so Dave built a real true stereo path with a filter on either side. So the analog filter is like left and right are 2 separate units. And you can actually modulate them separately as well if you want, because they're completely 2 separate filters. But there's 16 on board. So in 8 voice mode, that's stereo 8 voice. And then you have a button right there, 16 voice, you touch that button and you have double the polyphony, but in mono at that point. And it's one of the other things I'll say is there's a lot of buttons and knobs on this, as you can tell. But Dave just hates there to be underneath that one layer on a display, that there's something hidden underneath. You know how hierarchical menus are in these things? They're tiny, and you've got to dig for some feature, and you're a couple levels down and getting back to go somewhere else. It's just, it's not, he hates it, and so he hates it, we don't do it. And you'll find some buttons on here that are incredibly powerful because he didn't want to very much a knob and button guy. All right, so we definitely heard a couple of sounds there. This one's mellifluous, but in your face. Lots of instruments you have and haven't heard of. 150 gigabytes of these APO sounds. So that's like a full-on orchestra with every possible playing style sample. Pianos that, like, for example, if I hit the basic program thing and turn down the sawtooth wave and just bring up a piano, none of the pianos have loops. Pianos don't have loops. Pianos just die away. Eventually going to die away. If I were to put that in reverse and play a couple of song, notes here, you'd have to wait and wait and wait before finally it's going to calm on up. So they're allowed to die away to like minus 96 dB. That's how you get your 150 gigabytes. You do that. That's the piano sound near mic. It's a Steinway, 1928 Steinway. And then here's some far mics. Hear that? It's like the near mics are crisper, drier. They're close. You have the room in there now. And then you have the player perspective. Here's the piano sampled with the pedal down so that the sympathy of all the strings is ringing. So you have that near, and then you have that far. You have all this sound and there's really no parameters operating. We hit basic presets, everything's sort of vanilla. This is just like listening to some of the sample sounds. But that's what they'll do, and it'll be key map after key map. Each one of these is 2 layers, velocity switch, so the player was sampled soft and the player was sampled loud, and it velocity switches as you play soft and loud, without using a filter or any other kind of artificial thing. So the amount of attention that went into their part of this instrument is enormous, because they're obsessional. Like, for example, there are 17 categories. This is piano, has lots more pianos. Let's go down to bass, which is bank number 2. ATO thought it was a good idea that the first bass sound you hear is actually not quite an acoustic bass, but somebody's version, it was modified and supplemented to. It's called the bass card. And it was played with drum brushes. So that's your first sample. Get that nice metallic sound when it's hit. Also, sounds is like really, really wide open. So you don't just have like all of you, how many have played samplers? Yeah, at some time or other, something with sample sound. Yeah, it's pretty vanilla, right? It's like in the recording section, you can almost hear them say, now play that note really straight, and as much as possible, don't change anything. So we need to get a flute and do all that. It's really constricting for the player. Here, I feel like it must have been opposite, because every single sound that you hear is some kind of performance. These strings. If I just play simple with no modulation or anything. Functions like start time of the sample and end time out to the piano, so I can move into the sound just by moving a knob, you know? It still swells, but there's less. And I might want to put the envelope attack up a little. So if you're going to design a pad of some kind, you might want that. It's a little more stable than the other one that really comes in. But anyway, you have these long files that are high fidelity, multi-mic'd, played different ways, and then you get to go in there with start, end time, loop if you want or not, and isolate a portion of that sample and play with it. So that's one of the ideas on the purely digital side, is that you have an enormous library of sounds, and you can reach into any of them and just use a small part that you might want. For example, the first section is called ambience. And as opposed to the other maps that have the same instrument sounds, maybe it's different samples, but it's all piano, right? These are 88 different, it's like a directory of this kind of dystopian, vague landscape, all somewhat different with even pitch content, right? Each key. So if you like this one and you want it on the whole keyboard, you hold that down and you press the thing called sample stretch, right? So that sample stretch thing is nice. There's the synth section, for example, has all the Prophet DS waves, and you're able to audition those. That's a famous instrument from back in the day. Where are you, little synths? There you are. Yeah. So these guys are all the DS wave tables. You can do the same thing. Loop them and get them stretched out on the keyboard. So there's 150 gigabytes is a lot of sound. It's even kind of unimaginable, especially in a keyboard. So let me play some more sounds here. Because you have this mixer here, the obvious thing to do is to layer sounds, right? Have there be part electronic oscillated sounds, the sound synthetic, subtractively treated with filters, and have them layer in with voices. And one way you can do that is to be subtle. So if I make a pad, like a synth pad, that's classically sounds like there were no samples, there was just only the oscillators. But if I turn down the oscillators, trilling, major second trills on their flutes. So you have a lot of depth to go into to add to your sounds that at first don't seem to be behaving in a functional way, but they are. And then sometimes you're not so subtle. Prophet X. You have these, I don't think you can see them with the GoPro because that's there, but
You can move it.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, these are. If I touch it like that, then I'm sort of locking it in, I'm latching it there. Takes a while to tune it to the right fifth there. These are really fun because you can play them rhythmically. There's a lot of sound. That one's pretty rude. So I think that every time I present this, I'm thinking, so how do I define what it is? It's this combination between the real-time thing you can do on a synthesizer, the reason you want it, the reason that there's knobs for you to touch, all that impulsive, immediate change aspect meets these sounds that are normally not in that environment. They're in a composer's environment with a powerful computer and terabyte drives, done in a DAW, right? And you drop. It's not like you're not being spontaneous. I'm not saying that, but it's a different workflow, and it's not as accessible and flowing as a keyboard typically is, where you feel like you can make changes. So the idea, if you were a film composer, I think one of the ideas would be you played a picture with this, because those guys never have enough time to do their work. They're given the thing to do in the last month of production. You have to get fast ideas, and then you have to flesh them out really fast. So the idea of playing the picture, being able to print some track, some idea you had for that, and then go back to your other environment, the big environment with the computer, and finish it, might be one way you could use it. And another way is because this keyboard, bring this over here, maybe you can actually read some of these things. The keyboard department, yeah, you can kind of read that. Tons of clavinets, you move through it, go into the suitcase, Rhodes, and Wurlitzer, and Hammond land, where there's a ton of organ samples, and you can be the guy in the blues band that's going, instead of with 3 keyboards, with 1 keyboard, taking care of all the synth and lead work, and all the pianos and organs and stuff. So it's got that functionality as well. So it's hard to even name that there's one customer type that is the person for the instrument. Okay, in this sound, you got also hidden stuff, right? If I play the sequencer, it's called the Porcaro Plus. staccato violin. But in the sound, it actually, it offers you something you don't hear, you feel. It's kind of mid-rangey attack thing. It's out of the way. You're unaware of it entirely. I really like sounds where there's little mysteries in it. Now, the sequencer is a 64-step sequencer. We have them on almost every DSI piece. 64 steps, 6 notes per step. In this case, it's polyphonic. Some of our sequencers are like one track of notes and then a bunch of tracks of modulation stuff. This one's kind of a note sequencer. But in this case, you can use the mixer to actually play and reveal sounds slowly. Like maybe the intro to one of your songs. It's just like the Rev 2. If you guys know of that piece, the Rev 2 offers 2 layers per program. So same thing on the Prophet X. You have 2 complete layers, right? And they don't share anything. They could have different BPM. They have different sequences, different arpeggiations, different everything. And you can layer them, stack them, or you can split them on any program. So in this case, that's what's happening. We're using a split, but the one sequence is running the whole deal. Now the other thing Dave did is in this modulation matrix, you have the ability on any of these to do heck of modulation. I'm playing 2 sine waves now. That's one of the waves in the oscillator. We can have them modulate each other to create these kind of FM effects, frequency modulation, or amplitude modulation by modulating amplifiers. When I turn that mod wheel on, I'm turning on mod 4 now. Mod 4 is oscillator 1 to cutoff. So that first oscillator is now modulating the filter frequency cutoff. And then modulating something in the room as well. And when I go in and I hit that slider 1, then I'm actually changing the pitch of oscillator 1. And then also, you can do all these AM/FM effects in the box using the oscillator. But Dave, in this piece, also included all the samples. So if you want more complex kind of modulation thing going on than just a repeating oscillator that's going to give you that effect, then you have like those alto flute trills or or the piano sound, or drum sound, whatever you want can be the thing that modulates the filter and maybe drives it crazy for a short amount of time. Or I have a few examples, but I'm going to play those just because those are kind of sounds that are just really, you don't hear very much, because I don't know that many pieces that can do that. I tried to make that sound, where's my little trumpet thing? I tried to make that sound that you hear a trumpet play. Sometimes you hear a brass player and it's a little distorted or has a little extra stuff. It's spit. They spit in their mouthpiece, and so they can't control that sometimes. And you hear that as a kind of dirty sound. It's kind of a cool sound about a brass instrument that is one of the things that makes it special. So first I did the module, I put a Harmon mute on there using this high pass filter to kind of make it more nasal. Now, I'm using what? One of those ambiences I played, you know, that was like this sound. One of those sounds is doing the modulation on the trumpet. Now, I turned it down so you wouldn't hear it. A little obvious there. But anyway, it's a complex modulation that you can get strange effects out of. And there's a lot of sound in here that actually fool around with that concept. There's also just which is pretty much a copy of a Prophet X bass from the 70s, one of Dave's, well, his first superstar instrument that he did. Here's a program using split. On the left side, no samples at all. Just this filtered kind of sound. This filter is a one never used by DSI ever. It's actually a legacy filter from the 80s. Back in the day, Dave Rossum, and when I was with EU, the Emulator 3 was coming out, 16-bit, and he wanted an analog filter on there. He designed one. And then after some time, it went out of production, couldn't get it anymore, and it recently came into production. So Dave Smith is using a Dave Rossum filter in the Prophet X because it was designed for samples like that, you know, which is, if you have a filter you've designed for, you know that there's these kind of oscillators doing these kind of things, then that's a filter that has predictable, you know what's coming, so you know how to design your filter. But here you have samples that can be screeching high, clear tones, or they can be fat, muddy, almost anything. So using this particular filter, you put a overdrive circuit in the filter, so effects section where you can use a high pass filter. So the low pass filter, you can hear it close down from the top, right? And all you have left is the low frequencies, low pass. The exact opposite for the high pass filter where you start with the lows. Now I've removed the lows and I'm only maintaining the highs. You use both together. Then on the right side, there are these voices. Now I think that guy is the Amen. That's the Amen, but once you drive it up, it sounds almost like a ney flute. The other thing is you lose track that it's a voice after you sort of start aping some other thing. So I was trying to ape another sound, and to me, at least when I'm doing it, I'm forgetting it's a voice, and I'm thinking it's some other kind of instrument, and then I'm trying to play it like some other kind of instrument. But the voices, of course, in these collections affect you the most because, you know, lodged in that great memory bank back here, we have a lot of voice stuff in there, and we're very partial to those, you know, where the voice lives, and you notice every little thing about pitch changes and everything. Compared to the whole spectrum, you notice more about the voice range around, what is it, 500 or 800 to 3,000 hertz. I mean, that's probably too wide. Anyway, that's what we're sensitive to. So when you play voice samples and you bend them and make something different out of them, typically super effective. And not just to moms, but to everybody. I'm just going to keep playing because these combinations sort of demonstrate what is here, but please ask questions because I really don't mind getting interrupted. This has aftertouch, so a lot of times you linger on the key, and that's a whole lot of change you can get there. And I'm thinking that maybe I don't know, for me, that's 40 units out of 128, so third power, that's a lot of pitch change. For me, I just want to know that they're not fixed. But you can get down to like 6 or 7 and it's too much, you know? If you just want a little... Even that is like super, super deep. So I find touch sometimes, the less you do, the more you can control this way more than you can control your playing, you know? Especially if mono after touch, you know? None of these keyboard manufacturers these days make poly-aftertouch keyboards, more to the pity. If you have an old keyboard like a Prophet T8, you know, or a mini board, Kurzweil or something, but then you're fixing it all the time. So then you have a whole, like, you've rescued an animal and you have to take care of it. But there is a thing called MPE, which is multi-dimensional performance extension, maybe. And that is going to come in to save the day. We're going to try to get all our instruments to conspire into that. And that'll let you do things like play a chord with a guitar sound and bend just one note, you know, instead of the whole thing bending. Like a slide guitar would, maybe holding some tones. That's something I think we're almost to the point of convincing Dave that you should do that.
So is this actually support MPE?
No, but I'm saying there's a campaign behind the scenes. There's a campaign going on. That's what we're about. Every time I play it, I mean, it is an instrument that asks for it in a way, because so many. Well, just these. There's a ton of Balinese. If we go into, let's say, the basic preset again, maybe just make something here. Peruse some of these. Extended playing techniques, or in the beginning you have this kind of mournful tonalities. If you just want that last part, you know, turn it around, then you have to wait, you have to change the end time. Yeah, just a ton of this kind of just sound material that you have to ask yourself, where would I use that? You know, where would I exactly use that? You never know where your next hook is coming from. So it could be an exciting string sound. Synth department, for example, those synthesists out there know that one of the great tools is to use a noise as a source. Well, at the end of the synth section, there's a whole sort of department of noise in here that this is called air. Then you have amp A. C. organ with no notes or tones, just the fast Leslie electromechanical sound of the organ, and the fast, the slow, a fault, a ground, pink noise, thermal noise, white noise. So lots of options. If noise music is your thing, the noise section plus the modulation of the samples, you will be the next noise artist. So yeah, it's hard to say what it's for. There's so many end results that can come out of Prophet X. So there's a lot of customers, genres, ways to use it. Be steered in a lot of ways. Now that 150 gigabytes is sitting on a drive in here. It's a 220 gig Samsung drive, one of those solid state, really fast drives. And part of the technology that what makes this instrument interesting and special and that they solve to make it exist is the fact that all streams every time I turn that program, button, the right things start just streaming off the drive and are ready for you to play them. Now, sometimes they're not really loaded yet, but you hear them anyway, and that's part of what he's figured out to do with streaming samples. And that's kind of how it exists. But there's a free space on that drive, so users, that means all of us, can put our own sounds in there. We're going to come out with a program by the end of the year that's going to allow you to take your WAV files, put it in a Mac or Windows version of the program, and it'll convert it to those samples to this format and allow you to map them on the keyboard as you see fit, and then you put them on a USB 3 thumb drive, stick them in the sample input thing right here, and copies it to the directory, and then you start using your sounds, either with these sounds, with the oscillators for sure, in some way to start the program.
Is this like the Rev 2 that has both the factory and
Yeah.
music?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you get it, there's these different banks, and the one bank says U, there's 4 of those, that's user. One bank, 4 banks say F, that's factory, and one bank says A, that's there's 4 of those. So what is that? Okay, the F ones, 128 each times 4, 512. 512 patches that we came up with to get started with. Those sit in the factory, and they can't be overwritten. So they're always there. You always have that resident amount. So that means you're free and able to say, I can do anything I want with the U ones, because those are the copies of the F ones. So we just copied the 512 to the user's side. You can go in there and say, I want to edit this, and just hit save, knowing you've got the original backed up in factory. Or wipe them out. Just say, I'm just going to start from scratch and make a whole bunch of presets. And I don't care because I got them backed up in the F banks. That's kind of how Rev 2 works, and yeah. So it's a lot of sound. It's good to learn, just to go through programs if you're figuring the instrument out and try to figure out what went on. One thing you can do is there's I think you can see it right there, show. It says, if I hit show and I start moving knobs and just touching controls, I'll see where things are set without moving them at all. I touch a knob and it'll tell me what value it's on. See, now I get that screen. Oh, they have it 164 on cutoff frequency. So that's what that sounds like, or something like that. You can, by using show, you kind of protect yourself from that. And then these effects are really good. I'm going to bring this over here because it's sort of double for the Rev 2. The Rev 2 has one effects bus and you can put anything through. This has 2, so you're looking at them now. They're broad, they're invoked with buttons. So you could even be just jacking it on in the middle of playing if you want, or off. I'm out of there. But it's the same menu on the top and the bottom. So if I look at what's there with effect type, and delay stereo and bucket bridge delay. Those are the 2 delay types. This sync button means that any time-based stuff, when you go set it, instead of saying milliseconds or something, some 377, and you're like, what's that? You have to know what 377 milliseconds is, third of a second. But if you put a sync on, then it's going to say dotted eighth, half note, and you'll be like, what's that? That's relating to whatever the BPM is set at the time, and whatever, how fast that sequence will run. So if you have a delay set and it got the sync button on, then your delays are synced to the whole rhythm that's going on, because it's either going to be like every quarter note, or it'll be maybe every eighth note, or a dotted quarter, which usually is pretty funky compared to the others. And you learn what those clock divisor things, how they affect the music when you try to sync. So also the LFOs have sync. So if you have something vibrating or modulating something, when you put sync on, you'll notice in the display that, oh, it's no more just meaningless abstract numbers. It's, you know, a musical value I recognize. And that LFO is going to be every quarter note and a half, making it cycle. And then when you hear that modulation relating to the BPM, then I have it on all the time. I mean, I just can't imagine really doing a free anymore. I like them all to be related, so I always have that stuff. But,
What is assignable inputs? The sequence sustain, volume?
no, sustain definitely means sustain for this pedal, which is an on-off. Volume is for a volume pedal. Pedal CV you can use a couple ways. You can either use it as a pedal or as a control voltage coming in. And then sequence, you can actually start the sequencer with an audio file or something. If you exceed a certain dB level, it'll actually start the sequencer. So in a band setting, you might have that rigged to something from the drummer or whatever. I've never used it, but. And then you have USB and MIDI. So you know if you connect to a computer, it's easy these days to just put a USB cable in, but you have MIDI for any kind, tons of legacy stuff that uses MIDI. Then you can get much more specific to that.
Are you reverse and stretch through? Would that be universal for the whole keyboard?
The sample stretch?
Yeah. And kind of the reverse function.
Oh, the reverse? Yeah, the reverse stays, as I say, they're persistent. So, like I forgot it was on before, and I was like, where's my sound? And then I turned it up, no sound, because I'm waiting for all those things to come out, crawl out of there minus 96 volts. Yeah, yeah. But as far as sample stretch go, yeah, that's more just anything on there. It doesn't have to be one of those special one note per key thing. It could just be, let's go in to make a program. Let's make a pad, some kind of like big sound pad, and we're going to choose chorus, because they do have some really beautiful children's choirs that even the very first. Now notice the loop. The loop is way over there. The loop is actually lit. Now this is a sound that. Like a lot of DSI instruments, all these waveforms have this shape mod feature, which just means, well, it's got 4 waves, but actually it's got a lot more than 4 because each of them can have any position on this shape mod, which is basically taking the square wave in this case and moving it so that more is positive energy and less is negative, or more is negative and it's called duty cycle. But it really changes the. Until you shape mod it to the end. Like if I just touch LFO2 and I touch that wheel, I'm now like doing this with that knob, you know, but I'm letting the LFO do it for me, right? And I can have it use another way. Square wave or different. Now I turn the amount down so it's not up, up, up. And slow. Now it's just changing over a slower amount of time. Now we can put the other oscillator on. And just by mixing the amounts up. And you turn on chorus or something. Have the chorus just be modulating it a lot, a little slower. Then you go down here and you turn on reverb, and you just make the reverb go for a really long time. Actually go and put in some other kinds of sounds here. Well, the super plate took all the sound into a special world and it went away. You know, you have to just bow down. Say that's what happened. Any other questions while I was?
But
Yeah.
I got two, is this both two-pole and four-pole?
Yeah, there's one filter up there in the effects that's high pass, 2-pole. And then this filter is 4-pole low pass. And it has no switch or it's always that. Yeah, that's the way. It was a legacy filter, so I think Dave didn't feel like he could really change much about it except to add the drive into the module. Anybody else? Entrance pad. This is a pretty large. It's got the phaser on that bass that I was showing you before that was played with drum brushes, sticks. That was the bass card. This one's called the Bassinator. Somebody just designs these actual instruments and makes them, and they look incredible. And Trolls sampled them, but now he's got them in this environment which is filter rich and strange. Uninvited stuff that they don't take out of their samples. I mean, just yeah. So it's really interesting sound content to play with. Each of these sections are just endless. Full of stuff. So I could sit here and play, what's in there. I'm trying to just give you the idea that there's an enormous supply of interesting material to make sound with. And then your synth knowledge. How are you getting along? You say you're a beginner. You just bought a Rev 2. Find your way.
It's the most incredible synthesizer. The thing about buying one. Just for buying.
Yeah, Rev 2 is amazing. Yeah, it's really different. There is nothing like it, and I agree with about the Rev 2. I mean, that's our revision 2 of the Prophet 8, which lasted 10 years, came out in 08. Dave just felt like he was still selling, but he just thought it deserved a change, a revision.
There is one difference is this has the show button. Other one, the good tune.
It's in a menu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just come in and each different parameter.
Right.
Will show right up.
Yeah. It has the same thing, but having the dedicated button is easy.
Right.
Easy way to do it. But the main thing about all these instruments, I think, Dave Smith instruments, is pretty much I've gone to lots of shows. I get tired of standing and talking. I sit down and watch people go up there and never seen it and used it. And kind of everyone, these are shows where electronic music interested people are there, right? So it's not just, anybody, but anyway, people that are at that show, they start making sounds, because he affords them, I say he, Dave, this is his whole philosophy, knobs, buttons, and things you can touch. And I did 10 years with Propeller Heads, I love that program. I worked hard on, trying to, evangelize it and everything. But I was in the box so long, I sort of forgot what it was like to be in front of a more immediate environment for changing sound and making things. And so I think there's really value in both, but now I'm in this idea of making sounds. In some ways, I remember being at Propeller Head saying, how are these hardware things selling? I thought we solved the whole thing, and it's just in the box, and it's cheap, and no, people like instruments. They like instruments that they can touch and that sound really good because they're optimized for audio. They're not just, email machines. Yeah.
Talk about the outputs and what can you route to the different outputs.
Well, there's two. There's A left and right and B left and right. So when I talked before about there being 2 layers in any program, there can be 2 entirely different layers that you can either stack or split. If you wanted to, and you plug these in, that B layer would go there. If you didn't have it plugged in, they both routed to this.
Quadraphonic then.
Yeah, you'd have split them out, and in your mixer, you could do anything you want like that. Well, it's like having these effects on board, if you were a player who's making a record or whatever, and probably if you go and the person who's mixing and producing Are they going to want you to have that reverb on that keyboard sound that you're playing? Maybe they say turn it off, you know, so we can print it without. We can mix you with the one we have here, which is probably way better. But the fact that those parameters are able to be in the modulation matrix, so that's how I could hook up all kinds of things about the delay here into the wheels. And it would be part of this program in a profound way, not just some delay that's on it, but a controllable delay. You know, then you'd have to weigh that and say, no, the track I put on, sorry sir, I need to use my delay because I'm using it for musical reasons, you know, not just some effect on top of it. So that's nice. So when I say the modulation matrix, we call them patch chords, but when you look at this here, yeah, the minute I hit this button, each of these is a patch chord. See that slider one going to cutoff frequency? That slider one mapping is right here. So if I turn it to 127, I've made it go away, kind of. So that's too much. So I'll make it less. That's less. You know? So sometimes it's positive, so you have minus 27. Anyway, there's 24 of those. So it could either be that the slider's doing something, or it could be this LFO2 is modulating that thing. And you see that a lot of these are empty. Off, 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 off. You get down to the dedicated ones. That's where a lot of these interesting sounds come from. That menu is full, chock full of something affecting something else. So, and then one of the targets can also be, like if you set something up in modulation 4, so it always happens a little. Then you say, but then I want the wheel to increase modulation 4 patch chord, so when I go for it, I really go for it. Then you say modulation wheel to mod 4 amount, which is the line before. And so you kind of nest these relationships into there. It sounds nerdy, but it's pretty doable because you hear the result right away. And I assume everyone in here knows you're a nerd. So I just have to accept that. I love it. So I'm nerdy about it. So let's see, checking on time, it's 7:12. Lots of times you don't get to know what an instrument's like unless you play it. So I'm sure there's some of you out there that would be happy to come out and play through the sound. Just as you see, you don't have to be a prestidigitation person to get a lot of. See what I mean? I didn't even know what was down there, but dollars to donuts. That kind of show and tell and just come up walk away. That's called chamber music too, and I don't even understand why. It doesn't really sound like chamber music. So yeah, I'm opening that up. So anybody can come up here.
Why don't we see if anybody's got any questions, anything that's like that wasn't touched on, or anything that.
On each CD in and around, can you look up the sound
Well, stomp box, I'm thinking you would just play from the outputs going into the stomp. You mean like a distortion box or something? Yeah, here you can just go right out of the outputs. But a drum machine, you're wanting to do some CV in, maybe? Yeah, I don't think so. Our Pro 2, the Prophet 2, it has 4 CV ins and 4 CV outs, and it's really rigged for relationship with module. You know, that's a piece that can really hook in, because usually you want more than one. So,
is there a port on the top that detects an audio source and will beat detect for some other to match the sequencer up?
no, there's the sequencer input that
Right.
if you send it the audio signal, it starts the sequence.
Okay.
That one is an example of it coming in and doing it. Yeah, but by and large, I wouldn't say this is a CV heavy.
The pedal CV that can be assignable.
Yeah, yeah.
You could hook up, like, say, a Moog control processor to it if you want to do modulating something.
Having not done that, I say yes in the abstract.
Seems doable.
Yeah. It's a single. And that kind of thing has been on keyboards for a long time, right? Because that same pedal you use can also be on a router to anything. So let's say you wanted a pedal on the filter because you always like to do that. Or you have a wah-wah setup or something like that. Then that would be that pedal CDN and you can assign it to the filter.
I saw an auxiliary envelope.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, the first two are dedicated. One's amplifier and one's filter. Those are kind of like set the most, they have the envelope amounts and velocity switches. Those next two, the 3 and the 4, that can be sent anywhere you want. So it could, a lot of times, the first thing that comes to mind is some instrument that you want to make that has a pitch change always like a little dip as you play it. It's not a thing that's how hard you hit or anything, just when it happens, it happens. Or you set it and then you control velocity for how much on that, and you send that to oscillator management. That would be an example of envelope 3 or 4. But the thing that's cool about 3 and 4 is they can repeat. So you can put them in repeat mode, and then you've got 2 envelopes that are repeating envelopes. And those can be like function generators. So you build a shape, you know, takes a long, what do you call that at the carnival when you ride up for a really long time before you get scared and go down. You could have that kind of attack set, and then a quick decay to a sustain, and then you could repeat that over and over again, and even sync that. So yeah, envelopes are, you know, like anything else you can run out. You want to do one more thing that's cool, and then you want to have something else. So there's 4 LFOs, yeah, and 4 envelopes, but they're all the same: attack, decay, sustain, and release. 4 stage envelopes. Yeah.
So the first 2 are dedicated, but can you also route them to additional targets as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I go down here to and look at, that would be a source question, and I send amp envelope to anywhere I want. And there's a lot of places, but I don't see amp envelope in there. See, I see envelope 3 and 4. Oh, yeah, envelope DCA. There it is. And then what can we send it to? Oh, the whole kit and caboodle. Yeah. Yeah. And the same with the low pass filter envelope. We can send that anywhere. So both dedicated. I'm thinking of never mind. They're both dedicated, but they can have additional functions. Yeah. I just never done that. Because I've always had, with the extra 2, enough for my purposes. And I like them to be separate. But it makes sense. You want it to be exactly like the basic shape of the sound. Yeah. What made you think of that? You're thinking of a specific thing you'd like to
You
do?
never have too many envelopes.
It's, yeah. The first of the, let's say, this is the number 1 I didn't do the voicing with. When I got this back and they said, oh, they have the factory presets in here. This is the first one, PXTs. warm thing behind the very clean poly sound. I thought it was an amazing thing, and then I realized once I add them back in, there's something about the quality of the sound that I would really miss without it. Then it just seems creamy, right? The minute it goes overboard, it gets to be like, now I wish I could hear the notes better. But anyway, it's a really interesting programming thing, to deliberately add noise into a sound. That was an interesting choice. Oh, this is interesting. Sound Tower, they do all the editor librarians for DSI stuff, right? So then they'll come out with a program that is their editor librarian for this, right? And then you say, okay, good. Now I can, whatever I've done, whatever they started me off with, I'm going to put them in the computer, change the order really easy by moving them around with my mouse. I'm going to make more patches because now I can see that all the parameters on one screen, and you're used to using your computer. Sometimes that's faster. And then also there you can randomize. And then there you can constrain the randomization and say, you know, I like the way this motion sounds in this. I don't want to change the motion, but I want the timbre to change. And then you could just say randomize just these parameters, which I think is much more successful because if you randomize everything all the time, it's like a whole lot of no, right? No. But yeah, so that's Sound Tower. We're partners with them. Excellent. And yeah, that'll happen. Probably a desktop module will happen. All of our other pieces have one, so if you don't need a keyboard, you have a lot of keyboards. We'll probably do that, and it'll probably, though, be like the Prophet 12, where there's so many knobs here, it's hard to fit them on the form of a desktop module, so then you have to use a shift button to get to some of them. Not ideal, but...
We want more knobs.
You want more knobs. You don't want a shift button.
We all want.
Let's get a t-shirt that says download. Shift
More knobs, just think of it.
Yeah. And then a lot of people have been asking about, because they like the piano sounds a lot, what about a 76-note version with a different keyboard that's a little bit better for it's a nice feeling keyboard, but it's definitely a synth keyboard you'd use for organs and strings and synths. When it comes to piano, you know, sometimes you're like, the piano sound can only be as good as I imagine it is playing the keyboard.
So what's the answer to that? I mean, is that just a question that's out there?
Yeah, it's enough so that Dave's talked about it and said, well, here's if we did make that, here's the keyboard I might use, and let's find out how real that is. Do people really want it? Because I mean, it's a lot of these are made in the Bay Area, right? The other thing is, why can't we have a larger drive so that no matter how large 150 gig seems or 50 for yourself, of course everyone always wants more. We're humans. And so why not a terabyte drive in there, And then it would have to to be fast enough with all those various seek, I don't know what they are anymore in SSD, there's no seek time, there's a lot of no nothing, right, what's moving. So as long as it qualified, we probably then stock them and sell them, I don't know. Those are things that have come up. Somebody wanted a polyphonic expander, which I thought was a good idea, because the truth is, 8 voices in stereo, like, I don't know, did we do this already? Then we can actually listen to that piano in stereo. That's, if you listen to the 16 voice in stereo again. Go to mono. It's a pretty big change, but the truth is, if you, the minute you go stack or split, if you started with 8, then you're in 4. Because if you're going to now put one on top of the other, you're gobbling up two every time, 2 channels. So then the 3 people in Germany, actually all Germans, said, you need a polyphonic expander. You know, this would be the control thing, and that would just be more channels. And then you're controlling the whole thing, but with more polyphony. That's kind of a good idea.
Here's another one for that.
Yeah?
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
3 Germans in 1 Portlandia. Okay. Yeah, so all that's kind of possible. It just depends if people like the idea of this in the first place. I mean, if I really said, aren't these film sounds cool, you'd all be like, yes, but we're really film composer, maybe some of you are. So I think that to imagine what this box is that it's kind of whatever you want it to be. It's, I think it's a really good, it's the best synth sound he's ever come out with, the evolution of the Prophet sound. Because of many things, because our partners had such high fidelity, but also because Dave did the true stereo thing. So it's just a really good sounding board, and it has playlist feature, which is nice for performers, because instead of just this encoder choosing sounds and where was that again kind of thing, you get to have 10 sets of 16 programs each that you call up with these soft buttons here. There's 4 soft buttons underneath the. And so here's the playlist where you invoke it. And then 4 times 4. So each set has 4 times 4 of these. Let me see if I press it. Yeah, set 1, and then this is your, and then you can list 1. So you use the knob to go to list 1. That might be your second song, or that might be part B of your song if you're using a lot of patterns. But you know, the Prophet 6 and OB6 have these buttons right here, like in the old style back in the day, so performers could quickly, play and quickly hit a button and go to their sound and not go to a knob, because that's treacherous. So the playlist function is brand new, again for performers. So I once again invite you, if you like, or we can just sort of break it up and get into like a chit-chat mode, and anybody who wants to play it, it's still live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think unless anybody has any burning questions, we might just move on to the next phase. We've got a couple of things. Definitely thanks, Jerry, for doing all this and talking all So a couple things. Definitely stick around. We're going to do some raffles. We got the big feedback module raffles are also after that. We have our Sequential Prophet X here, we have his, and Jerry's going to stay on until we close. So, one-on-one questions, but yeah.
Thank you guys again. Let me just hit